My name is Margarita Köhl. I'm head of the Department of Design at University of Applied Sciences in Vorarlberg, and I'm really delighted that we're this year first time part of the New European Bauhaus Festival, because I think it links perfectly to our study programs and also our research focuses. And as Susanne already mentioned, this space is a collaborative space which enables us to think about a convivial future. So I'm really delighted to welcome also our guests today, our keynote speakers, Marcela Heredia and Florina Seeger, as well as our panelists, which will attend us here at the stage afterwards. Antje Wagner from the Energieinstitut Vorarlberg, as well as Wolfgang Simmer-Wallinger, my dear colleague. So I welcome also the students who attend this festival, as well as all other guests and colleagues. And I would also say hi to people watching our event online. This event is going to be live streamed. Yeah, I would like to start with my impulse talk on the topic of this event. The event is called Living Otherwise. So I would like to elaborate a bit more about this concept of living otherwise and how we can enable the students to work with regenerative design or the principles of the New European Bauhaus. These principles encompass kind of orientation towards sustainability and also the fostering of communities in urban spaces and work at the intersection of design as well as architecture. So if you see this map of the campus, the question is, what do you see and what do you not see? What do you see? Yeah, actually we see buildings, so as Henri Lefebvre calls it, the conceptualized space, so the built environment. What we do not see is something we call nature, nature in the popular terms, nature as the living environment surrounding us, as well as the emotions, the feelings, the thoughts, the memories which are connected to specific spaces. So I would like to dive a bit more into this term of nature. Nature was actually a term that was coined in Western modern society to foster this divide between nature and culture, and also actually it was a tool to colonialize space and to domesticate the living environment. That's why Philippe Descola, for example, coined this term of le vivant, the living environment or the living creatures around us, which is not the same as nature. And I think this concept is quite interesting if we think about it in connection with mapping, because it could be the basis of different types of maps, of different types of mental models of space, which could be helpful for thinking about spaces and urban landscapes in a more regenerative way. Because it could help us to restore the lived and perceived space, to also think about memory, grief, or desire, care, conflict, and ecological interdependencies. So a map could not only picture what is the built environment, but also a proposal for it. So we heard about the future narratives before. It could be the basis for new future narratives. And what do we mean by regenerative design? We think that regenerative design is a next step after the sustainability movement, because we have to move away from this extractivist world as our climate is changing. We know that cities will be hotter within the next few years. That's also what a lot of students' projects tackled. So actually we should move towards this regenerative thinking, where we try to give something back to the planet and also adhere to planetary boundaries. So we think about a convivial future, living together beyond control and instrumental domination, and we think about shared negotiated spaces and new life orders among humans and non-human actors. Forms of living together based on autonomy and reciprocity, negotiated coexistence rather than control. So actually the technologies we use on a daily basis are at the moment still more following this paradigm of control. So maybe we should also shift it towards more autonomy. And that's what brings me to the concept of living otherwise. So what do we mean by living otherwise? This otherwise is a concept that has been developed in various discourses, starting from feminists, queer theory, also decolonial thought, where this living otherwise characterizes a way of living departing from the dominant way of living. So I would like to quote Alexis Paulina Gams, who is a black feminist writer, and she addresses what knowledge might be in this concept of living otherwise. If you can use both hands, use both hands. Knowing is not given, it is made. You can make it out of cornmeal or flour, preferably, out of dirt or fertilizer if you have to. Let your fingers shape it until they remember the making of the world. Then step on it and see how easily it flattens, how gracefully it changes its shape in the presence of pressure. And remember that there are billions of feet, there is always pressure. So that's a quote from her, I would call it, it's between poetry and theory, which is quite an interesting approach, also transgressing this Western thought of science, where she tries to create metaphors for thinking about this living otherwise. Maybe you think about how would it feel like if I was water, for example. So I think this metaphorical approach is what characterizes this decolonial approach, or also the feminist debates on how to live differently or restructure our world, create new systems with different narratives. And I think that's also what we try to foster in our study programs, so that the students become empowered to create new narratives about coexistence. So I gathered a lot of different approaches to living otherwise, but I will speed it up again to leave the floor for our guest speakers. But I think it's an interesting approach which can be used to think about more livable urban environments. So that's what we focused on also in our exhibition, and also the talks that will follow, who focus on urban space and how we can coexist also with other species, how we can redesign urban infrastructures so they enable us to have more future-oriented ways of development. And also this approach of critical mapping is a way to address space in a different way, to visualize or make visible other needs of different species or different people with different backgrounds. And I think it's very important to use these technologies in an emancipatory way, even if we are facing hyper objects. That's how Timothy Morton calls it, so phenomena which are not solved in an easy way. So if you address one question, maybe another question arises. That's what we call also wicked problem in the design sphere, where different projects or different levels of a topic are interlinked, and you always have to address this from different levels. For example, that's what the students know. We often work with the multi-level perspective, where you really try to understand how one level impacts another and try to create holistic solutions addressing all the different levels. So this is what brings me two approaches for generating transformation. One would be a systemic design approach, where you combine these technologies to make the needs of different stakeholders visible, or to understand a topic more thoroughly, and then create prototypes. That's what we saw in the exhibition before, and try to intervene iteratively to change something about actual conditions. But what we will talk about today is also how can we create formats to reach different people who are maybe not involved in the expert community, for example. So how can we make knowledge more accessible for a wider range of people? And this is what brings me to one core, future literacy, which we have to develop. I think also the students are sometimes very challenged by uncertainty, uncertain environments, entering the liminal space, this tolerance of ambiguity. There are no easy solutions. We always have to address different levels of a topic, and that's why I think this learning cycle developed by Kolb is a very good model to experience a topic and then to reflect on it, and afterwards take on or draw on theoretical approaches to understand it, and activate your knowledge by experimenting with the theoretical concepts. And I think which is what is possible here in our environment is that we have a lot of dislocated learning. We can explore different surroundings and also test or experiment with different materials, ecosystems, and then create the prototypes and test whether our solutions are impactful or what they would change on different levels. So hopefully we'll enter a liminal space as well today, find out about new ways of interpreting interrelations between the different topics we will talk about, dive into new mindsets, and enter this liminal space and try to think about different cultural models. Because I think the two speakers we have here today both have a different perspective and will guide us through their projects and elaborate on how transformation can take place on different scales. So I would like to end my talk with a question. Where and how can we transform maps, spaces, and rules in our own context so that living otherwise becomes not just a topic, but a lived practice. Thank you. So I would welcome Marcela now to the stage. She's a cultural anthropologist from Colombia, actually, now studying or working in Vienna. And she's also very active. She's very active in this field of feminist activism, and I'm looking forward to your talk.
Thank you, Margarita. I have to prepare here my presentation. I'm not used to. Thank you so much. Great. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Margarita, for the invitation. And I'm really glad to be here tonight, or this afternoon with you. I would like to present you today a project we have together with a colleague of mine from Colombia as well, Susana Ojeda, Otros Futuros, which means other futures. The main idea, this is a project created by our association together with Soho Studios, which is a space in the 16th district of the city of Vienna, outside of the city, trying to create a space of culture, of encounters where several groups come together and talk about political or urgent issues. And we worked together this year with the Clima Biennale as well, talking about this topic about futures, what means how we can think about futures otherwise. Our starting idea was about this idea of climate collapse. Now we have right now several debates related to climate. What could we do? What are the challenges we face right now? Which kind of approaches we can develop on that area? And what we have seen in a lot of debates with several colleagues is that this debate about climate crisis leads also to a kind of collapse of imagination, like repeating kind of formulas we already know and repeating also patterns that come to the same results. And we identified two main narratives in this area. The first one is technology as the only answer for this climate crisis, which at the same time ignores or not respond to the question of inequality. Technologies could offer options, solutions, ideas, but at the same time, there are certain questions that still there, like where come the materials from for this technology, and everyone has access to that technologies, are main questions about equality and access, which remain in this approach of technology as the only solution for the future. And the second one is an alternative, like the idea there is no alternative. Like we are in the direction of the apocalypse, and there is no way to find something else. And the result of that idea is that we should be paralyzed. Like we don't have to do anything, or there is no alternative. And trying to find other ways to approach this question. Our idea with Susana, we have been working for several years in Vienna trying to build bridges between Latin America and Europe, and particularly Vienna. And the idea was to create spaces of dialogue between the Global South, the so-called Global South, and the Global North. We know that in the Global North there's also South spaces, and as well in the Global South, there is also North spaces. That is not so a clear division. But still, there is certain populations that remains in the global south that suffer a kind of collapse of the future in a moment of the history, and that was the moment of colonization. And still, the continuous extractivism that are suffering these communities is a place where this indigenous population or a lot of populations in Latin America have the feeling there is no future. So this idea of no future has been there for a long time and has been faced by a lot of populations in that region or in the whole continent. But these populations are still there. They're still resisting, protecting, rebuilding, or as one of the main ideas that is coming right now in Latin America and is very strong in terms of decolonial approaches is the idea of re-existing. These indigenous populations are talking a lot about how to create means, methods to re-exist, recreate, rebuild. So these gatherings we are creating put several questions. One of them is how we can learn from these margins, for these areas that has been ignored in terms of knowledge production, and what can be learned about crisis and dealing with crisis. And this idea should be a kind of inspiration of for the development of ideas of future. Sometimes for us in the discussions was difficult, this idea of future. Sometimes was like one future for the humankind, but at the same time the idea there is possible several futures, several possibilities. There is not only one alternative, one utopia, but that futures allow several perspectives. So we started these dialogues with climate activist leaders organizing from Latin America. And maybe here, like a kind of, explanation. There is a term, an alternative decolonial term from Latin America, which is Abya-Yala. Latin America, or in general America, it's a term which is a colonial one, was given by the French power. So Abya-Yala is a term coined by the indigenous populations in Panama, the Kuna indigenous population, and it's a kind of attempt of decolonization of the language, and it's gaining a lot of weight in Latin America, the use of this Abya-Yala term. And in this dialogue, the idea was to listen, to learn, and to connect. We create dialogues with three women from several contexts in Latin America, an indigenous person. She is linguistic, and she's a leader of the Misak community in Colombia, in the Andean region. The second person, Luzmeri Panche, she's also indigenous leader, environment activist, peace advocate in the Amazon region, also in Colombia. And one person focused in Flor Angel Augustin, focus on organization and territorial practices in the Dominican Republic. We are, afterwards, have a look, and we are going to focus in the first person, because that is the dialogue we already know, or we already have. Tomorrow, or after tomorrow, we have the second session, so it was not possible to present you today the second ideas, or the second person. And yes, our ideas was to focus on on different perspectives on relations to time and to territory. And here, this term territory is also important to be explained a little bit, because in Latin America, we don't talk about environmental issues or climate crisis. We talk about territory issues. Territory has a special connotation in Latin America. It's come from the critical geography and social movements and indigenous populations, and means that spaces are not fixed, that power relations and the environment relations between human beings, non-human beings, feelings, and ways to create this space could be changed. And this change depends of power relations. So for indigenous populations, territory is something that is changing, and they are trying to gain more power, let's say, or more influence in the creation of territory and the re-existence of territory. One issue which is important to be mentioned here also is the idea of language, because what we are doing with these dialogues is a kind of translation. This indigenous person or this activist, they speak Spanish, but Spanish is the second language for some of them. So they are talking with us in Spanish, and we translate these dialogues into German and English. And but we should always know that translations are something insufficient. We cannot always understand everything what is said in a conversation when we are dealing with several ontologies or ways to see the world. So translation is a tool of power. So what we try to do is not to make a fully translation on something, but much more to create a conversation about systems or to create inputs or inspirations for us. And what we do in every session is we pay attention to this interview. We create something together, and we materialize all these inputs in something what we can do, because for us knowledge is not something cognitive. It's not just about what we know in our heads, but it's also something that we can apply, that we can do. And that's, for example, one of the sessions, the first session we have already done. You can see the space here, that is Soho Studio, which is also a huge building in the 16th district of Vienna. And maybe here, stop, because as you can see here, we have a kind of kitchen in the middle of our discussion. And that's important for that moment, because for the first interview partner, the kitchen, or what we can translate as kitchen for the Misak, is the center of the social life. So for us, our discussions was important to have something that we can build together, that we can share together, prepare together. In that kit was a kind of tea. So the disposition of the space for the discussion is also important for the Misaks. Oh.
Que me han quitado los de arriba, porque es lo único que tengo, caramba, la tierra mía, porque es lo único que tengo, caramba, la tierra mía.
The idea during these three sessions is to create one exhibition or one common house, something that where we can put all our reflections. And it will be exposed in the exhibitions of Soho Studios. And the idea today is to present you some of the ideas about future or about time and space that were presented by Mama Bárbara Muelas. She's 80, or she's going to introduce herself. She's a music leader working in a lot of linguistic issues. And for her, the language is very close related with time and space. And this philosophical and theoretical in part inputs is what we are going to see in the next minutes. So I prepare some clips of her. So some of the ideas, the main ideas she present us the last time, and yes, at the end it is important for us, for Susana and me, my colleague, that these persons present themselves with their voices, with their faces, with their ideas, because they are the knowledge producers, and what we are trying to do is to create bridges between this knowledge. So here I introduce you, or she's going to introduce herself, Bárbara Muelas.
Mi nombre es Bárbara Muelas Hurtado. Tengo 80 años, ¿qué le parece? Entonces fui
Do you can read well? Yes, it's okay. Okay, it's in German and English.
docente de toda la vida docente, sigo siendo docente, que sigo trabajando con personas, estoy en este momento, estoy realizando el diccionario que me ha encomendado el Cabildo de Guambía. Entonces tengo ese trabajo, hacer un diccionario. Queremos hacer una cosa distinta, no como un diccionario convencional. Entonces estamos con ese proyecto.
So that's the voice, and you can get to know Bárbara Muelas. She's a celebrity somehow in Colombia. She is the first indigenous woman in the Language Academy of Colombia, and she's a very prominent thinker of the philosophy, or of the Misak philosophy.
Nosotros manejamos el tiempo, un tiempo presente, un tiempo pasado, un futuro, pero entonces tiene una relación con el espacio. Nosotros manejamos el tiempo diferente, entonces el pasado está adelante y el futuro atrás, y un presente inestable. Entonces tenemos un gran presente, un pasado adelante y un futuro atrás. Eso está en el pensamiento de los Misag, en la lengua. Adelante es lo conocido, lo que ya hemos vivido, lo que ya ha vivido mucha gente, y por lo tanto es lo que se puede ver y medir. En contraste con el futuro está detrás lo desconocido, lo invisible para el sujeto. Entonces esa es la concepción del tiempo. Y el presente es un presente grande que está un poco al pasado, y el presente es inestable. Por eso decimos es hoy en este momento, y ya pasa en instantes. Es como caminar, como que si caminara. Entonces el tiempo pasa muy rápido y se va haciendo como que quedando atrás, pero es el gran presente, y ahí estamos. Para nosotros los niños no es el futuro, los niños es el presente, porque están con nosotros, sufriendo con nosotros, todo con nosotros. Entonces es el gran presente para nosotros.
One of the most challenging ideas for us, and this is difficult for us to explain, we have, Susanna and me, always like troubles trying to explain that this kind of philosophy of time for the Misak population, but also for other indigenous populations in the Amazon also. What we can see is the past. For that reason, the past is in front of us. And what we can't see is the future. For that reason, the future is behind us. And the present is not just what is happening right now. The present is a kind of, some kind of continuity. It's bigger than this moment, but it's part of a present which is longer than we think. And this, like this challenging idea of that we can see is the past, and what we cannot see is the future, and it remains behind. Is something that is it's not just in terms of times, but also in terms of space.
El pasado adelante, porque el futuro está atrás, siempre queda atrás, con todo lo que hagamos queda atrás. Entonces, sí, siempre miramos el pasado, buscando las huellas, qué hicieron nuestros antepasados, eso es como seguir adelante. ¿Qué hicieron para nosotros poder, ¿qué le digo? Recoger todo lo que han hecho, toda la historia, y podemos transformar en ella y seguir adelante para ofrecerle a nuestros descendientes que vienen atrás también, porque tenemos eso de que los niños tienen que venir mirando lo que hemos hecho, buscando siempre las huellas de lo que hacemos. Nosotros seguimos las huellas de nuestros antepasados con la historia, pero también los niños van a venir detrás de nosotros mirando qué hacemos nosotros. Por eso nosotros debemos dejar muchas huellas interesantes, importantes para ellos. No podemos dejar abandonados.
And because of that reason, because the past is in front of us, and that is something what we can see, we just see what our ancestors did. That is what is in front of us, the steps, what they left behind. And she proposed also that we, as a humanity, as a humankind, as a persons, we should think about which kind of remains of ideas of step we left behind, so the people that come in the future can see what we do. And one important, and I think that's a very interesting and a challenging conception for the Misaks and for other indigenous populations, the children are not the future. The children are the present because they are there, they are with us. They are sharing our space. In that regard, they are also constructing our long present. That's other important idea.
Es que el espacio nosotros manejamos circular, desde un punto de referencia. Se expande circularmente hacia lo infinito, que es el espacio. Y también manejamos el tiempo, que es enrollar y desenrollar. A ver, enrollar y desenrollar, por ejemplo. En el espacio, nosotros cuando salimos de un punto referencial a otro lugar, le decimos desenrollar, desenrollemos. Vamos a otro lugar, es desenrollar. Y cuando lleguemos de allá, y nos invitamos a llegar otra vez a ese espacio, le decimos enrollar, volvemos a enrollar. Es como si un hilo invisible nos llevara y nos volviera a traer, nos vuelve a traer.
In this part, Bárbara Muelas explained the notion of time and space. These notions are together, and both notions are based on spiral model. So for the Misak population, there is no universal understanding of space. Space is always referential in terms of the person. Where the person has the center, then there, in that center of that person, started the space. So space and time are always a kind of spiral, in a spiral way. And when they go to a place, they say they unwind. So they are expanding in that spiral way. And when they return home, for example, they are returning on that spiral way. So this idea is also always referential and always changing, which is also a kind of, deconstructing ways of universalism in terms of time and space, which is a very colonial perspective of how we understand time and space. About crisis, and that's one reflection she also do in that terms.
Vivimos en un espacio con un inmenso respeto. La naturaleza, todo el espacio cósmico lo respetamos mucho, todo el espacio. Nosotros pertenecemos a la Tierra, no al contrario, por ejemplo. Entonces manejamos como que la Tierra es madre, como madre nos da vida con lo que cultivamos. Como madre, ella tiene su propia sangre, no podemos maltratarla, el agua, no podemos explotarla, no lo hacemos. Hasta para sembrar le pedimos permiso al espíritu de la naturaleza, que es el Pishimisat, para poder sembrar en la naturaleza. Le pedimos a través de los rituales que nos dé permiso para ¿cómo le digo? Para sembrar, para cultivar, para arar la tierra. Pero eso no hace el sistema occidental, digamos. Tiene otros conceptos con la tierra, con la naturaleza, que eso es explotar. Entonces, explotar quiere decir talar los recursos que hay. Desviar las aguas. Entonces, desviar las aguas y quitar las aguas en otro lugar, dejando a la gente que vive allí sin agua. Explotar también como hacer esa extracción de los metales, del petróleo. Eso es desangrar la tierra, eso lo están desangrando. Eso es el desarrollismo que tiene el pensamiento occidental. Lo que nosotros los indígenas consideramos que eso no se debe hacer, pero pues es imposible pues detener eso. Entonces ahora están sufriendo las consecuencias, que las aguas, que ya no hay agua, bueno, todo lo que estamos viviendo, eso es por la explotación y misericordia que piensa el desarrollismo, esas políticas de desarrollo. Nosotros pensamos diferente, nosotros querer la tierra, amar la tierra como madre. Entonces, hasta para sembrarte, como le digo, pedimos permiso.
So for her and for her community, in terms of crisis, one of the main elements that remains as a central issue is the relation with the so-called nature or with the non-human beings, and the relation of respect about how to deal and how to relate with this other, with the water, with the plants, is something central. Like in terms of crisis, is that one of the main elements she points out as important to be taken into account. And now, maybe a final remark for her
El
side.
pasado como guía, no como lastre. Frente a la angustia por un futuro catastrófico, los Misaj enseñan a mirar el pasado, lo que está adelante, para encontrar modelos de acción útiles. No se trata de vivir en el pasado, sino de inspirarse en la experiencia vivida para no dar saltos al vacío.
And that's the Cauca region. So in that regard, in order to look into the future for the Misak and for other indigenous populations in the Amazonian region, to look into the future needs to look into the past and to find their learnings how to deal with what we are facing today in terms of climate crisis and other kind of crises we are dealing in of our society. And with that, I would like to finish the presentation, and yes, I am expecting about our discussion afterwards. Thank you so much.